Hello and welcome to week 4 of Math 1 Club. This is a big week. We're going to talk about one of the big things, probably the biggest thing in regards to Math 1 and getting ready for Math 1 is slope. But of course, we have a warm up. So pause the video here and try these two problems out. All right, so you should have gotten 116. Oh my goodness, and 11 by 17. If you're good, fast forward. If not, stick around for the explanation. So we know that a square, we talked about this last week, a square has 4 sides that are all the same. And so if we really wanted to draw a picture, we could do it like this. But really, these are all 2x plus 3. And so if we're talking about this in terms of a perimeter standpoint, we can just do 4 times 2s or 2x plus 3. Now we're told that this is the exact same perimeter as this triangle, which has side lengths of 4x, x, and 4x minus 1. And so I'm just going to simplify both sides here. This gives me an 8x plus 12 equals a 9x minus 1, which is fantastic. Now we get our variables on the same side. So let's subtract 8x because we have more x's on the right. This gives me x minus 1 equals 12. And therefore x is equal to 13. Now, again, this is a part where we really want to make sure we're solving what it asks for. It asks for the perimeter. And so that means we're going to have to plug that back in. So I'm going to do 4 times 2 times 13 plus 3, which is 4 times 26 plus 3, or 4 times 29. So each side of our square would be 29, and because we have 4 of them, we multiply those together to get 116. We could try that with a triangle, and we get the exact same thing. So keep that in mind. For the second one, let's draw a picture. We have length and width. We're told the length of a rectangle measures. So measures is the same thing kind of as is. The length equals 5 meters less than. We're going to subtract 5. And then 2 times the width, so 2w. So I'm going to replace this L with a 2w minus 5. And this is a w. Now, if we add these all up, we're going to get 6w minus 10 is equal to the perimeter, which is 56. We also could have done 2 times 2w minus 5 plus w, and that gets us kind of the same thing here. But we solve, and we add 10 to undo the subtraction of 10, and then divide by 6 to undo the multiplication of 6. And we get w equals 11, which is great, but that only tells us the width, and it asks for both dimensions. So we do 2 times 11 minus 5, which is 17. So 11 meters by 17 meters. All right, guys, here's the big one. Slope. Slope slash rate of change. So slope means you're going to hear this from your parents will be able to tell you a couple things. They'll say rise over run. We'll say delta y over delta x. We'll say y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So what we're talking about here is two coordinates, two separate coordinates of x sub 1 and x sub 2, x sub 1 comma y sub 1 and x sub 2 comma y sub 2. And what we're doing is we're just subtracting the coordinates, but we have to make sure that we do the corresponding x and corresponding y together. So notice how these two go together and these two go together. We also don't necessarily care which one's x sub 2 and y sub 2, because we could just as surely rewrite this as negative y sub 1 minus y sub 2 over negative x sub 1 minus y sub 1, or sorry, x sub 2. And this would have the negatives canceled out, and we'd literally be left with y sub 1 minus y sub 2 over x sub 1 minus x sub 2. So don't think necessarily that you have to do the second coordinate minus the first. It can be any order as long as the x and y go together. So let's talk about an example. This is a good rate of change problem, right? So the big difference between slope and rate of change is slope we're really talking about just a number. Rate of change is always going to have units. In general, we usually want time to kind of be our x. Time will be our x. Money, objects, those are usually going to be our y. So for example, if you had 7 paintings after 2 hours, so we're going to say, okay, well, hours, that's time. We're going to make that our x. So 2 comma 7. And you had 11 paintings after 4 hours. So, or sorry, after 5 hours. So 5 comma 11. How many paintings are you making per hour? So we have these two coordinates, right? 2 comma 7, 2 hours, 7 paintings, 5 hours, 11 paintings. And we're going to figure out the rate of change, meaning how many paintings per hour we're making. So we're going to do y's on top, x is on the bottom, right? Delta means change. It means subtraction. There's a whole history there about dealing with the delta and the Nile and kind of shaped like a triangle, which is why we get there. But we're going to do 11 over 5, because those are corresponding y and x, minus 7 minus 2. So we're taking our difference of our y's divided by the difference of our x values. And so this gives me 4 over 3, which means that per hour, I'm making 4/3 paintings. So 4/3 paintings per hour, which means I'm just making more than one painting, right? I get done with one painting and I start a third of the next. But this is how we'd write the rate of change. So when we're finding slope of a line, we're going to read this from left to right. We're going to read it left to right. So when you're reading this, kind of here's our little graph that we're going to make a sketch of. We go left to right. If it goes up, like I just drew with the purple line, that's going to be a positive slope. If we're going left to right and it goes down, that's going to be a negative slope, right? We also can find that when we're actually doing slope with the coordinates. I'm going to start us out looking at graphs, and we're going to kind of plot the points and then find slope, but you also want to be able to do it by hand. Now, if you don't feel comfortable graphing coordinates, that's something that you're going to want to work on because we don't have enough time to talk specifically about graphing coordinates, but that is a big piece of creating lines. So I'm going to graph these 2 points. I'm going to go, oh, this is, remember, x comma y. So we're going to go over 2, up 3, and over 4 to the right, down 7. So 2, 4, 6, 7, right here. And we realize right now, if I were to kind of like sketch a line, that looking from left to right, our slope should be negative. So I'm going to show us 2 ways we can do this. We can either say, okay, well, how many units did I go down? I went down 3, 6, 9, 10. So I went down 10. And then I went to the right 2. So if I went down 10 and to the right 2, right's positive, right up and right are positive. I should put a positive here. And then down and left are negative. So went down 10 to the right 2. This gives us a slope of -5. Now, if we were to do this the other way, such as literally finding the slope via coordinates, we would go 3 minus -7 over 2 minus 4. Well, subtracting a negative is the same thing as addition. So this would give me 10 over, and then 2 minus 4 would be -2. And hey, guess what? I get the same thing. I get -5. Either way, either just graphing it or using the formula to find slope. So this means that for every 1 unit we go to the right, we're going down 5. Let's try this one more time before I let you go. We're going to go to the right 3, up 5. Here's our first coordinate. And then we're going to go to the right 6 and up 7. So as I draw my line, I realize that I'm going left to right. So that's left to right, I'm going up. So this is going to be a positive slope. If we look, we went up 2 and to the right 3. So just based on that, we get a slope of 2/3. Let's double check with our formula. So remember, delta y over delta x. So the change of y would be 7 minus 5. The change of x, because I put 7 first, I have to put 6 first. So 6 minus 3. This gives us a slope of 2/3, which is good. These two things need to interact with each other, right? They need to be exactly congruent. Otherwise, we did something wrong. Now, we could maybe have to simplify down, right? But that's okay. We get 2/3. Hey, try these problems out. I'm going to pause the video here. So let's see if I can get them all in there. There you go. Pause the video and try these 5 problems out. We're finding the slope. Try to do it with the formula. Try not to have to graph these. But pause the video here and see how you do. All right, this is what we got. 2/5, 2, -1 over 11, 0, and undefined. So that last one we were dividing by 0, which gave us an undefined answer. If you got all these right, congratulations, move on. If not, I'm going to do these for us real quick. So I'm going to use this second point as my kind of first value that I'm going to be subtracting from. I'm going to do 2 minus -6. And because I used the 2 first on the numerator, I have to use the 5 first in the denominator. So 5 minus -15. This gives me 2 plus 6, which is 8, divided by 5 plus 15, which is 20. Well, we can't leave it as 8 over 20, right? We got to simplify our fractions down. These numbers are both divisible by 4, so that simplifies down into 2 over 5. For the second one, I'm going to use our first coordinate as kind of what I'm subtracting from. So I'm going to do 10 minus 0. That's my delta y. And then 2 minus -3. So that gives me 10 minus 0 is 10. 2 minus -3 is 5. Now, you could say, oh, well, that simplifies down to 2 over 1 because they're both divisible by 5. But we want to leave this as just 2, right? If we don't want to leave it as 2 over 1, we want to simplify it all the way down just to an integer answer. For the third one, let's keep changing it up. Let's use this point first. So we're going to do -8 minus a -9. And then -4 minus 7. Negative or minus a -9 makes this a +9, so we get a 1 on top. In the denominator, we get -11. Now, you might be saying, well, hey, Mr. Herb, the negative's on top, right? In your answer, and now I got a negative in the bottom in the second answer. That's all right. If we have a negative in the numerator, we could also just write that as a negative outside or as a negative in the denominator. All 3 of these are congruent. Fourth one. We realize here right away that our y values are congruent. So when we're going to be subtracting this -2 from the -2, and then the 8 or the 1 from the 8, we get a 0 over 7. And that 0 over 7 simplifies down to just 0. The same thing happens in our second problem, except here we realize that our denominator is going to be equal to 0. And so we get -9 or even +9, it won't matter, over 0, and we can't divide by 0, so that slope's undefined. So this is why we talked about cross multiplication and everything before we got to slope, because this is what's called a missing value problem. So here what we're trying to do is we're trying to solve for r, and we're given slope, and r is going to be this y coordinate of the second point. It usually helps us to use whatever point has the r as our first coordinate. So we're going to subtract from this 10 comma r. So I'm going to do r minus a -5, right? That's the difference in my y's, over 10 minus 4, the change in my x's. And again, the reason we have to do our kind of corresponding x and y values is otherwise you're going to get a sign change that isn't necessarily happening in our graph. So this has to equal 3 over 2. So let's simplify our left-hand side down. R plus 5 over 6 equals 3 over 2. Now from here, you might have a couple ways you want to try this out. You might want to say, oh, let's try to get a common denominator, right? That would be a nice way to solve this problem. Or we can cross multiply. So we're going to get 2 times the quantity r plus 5 equals 6 times 3. So 2r plus 10 equals 18. So 2r equals 8. And therefore r is 4. And we could check this out again if we really wanted to, right? We could say, okay, well, 4 minus negative 5 over 10 minus 4, that's equal to 9 over 6, which is 3 halves. So we did it. R is 4. Hey, try these 3 problems out. That last one's pretty tricky. I'll let you know. All right, so pause the video and see what you get. All right, I get for the first one, r is negative 6. For the second one, r is 4. And for the third one, r equals 4/3. So if you got those 3, you're done. Way to go. If you have any questions on them, stick around or fast forward till we get to your question. So for the first one, I'm going to set it up. And again, we like r to be first here. If you don't do it that way, it's okay. You're just going to deal with a negative r. So I'm going to do r minus 8, my delta y, over 3 minus 7, my delta x. This is 7 over 2. This can simplify down to r minus 8 over negative 4 equals 7 over 2. And from here, we could cross multiply. So cross multiplying, we get 2 times r minus 8 equals negative 4 times 7, which is negative 28. I could definitely distribute the 2 here, but I'm actually going to do a bold step of dividing and get r minus 8 equals negative 14. And then we add 8 to both sides to get r is negative 6. If we check that out, we get negative 6 minus 8 over 3 minus 7, which would be negative 14 over negative 4, which, hey, that makes sense. That gives us 7 over 2. For the second problem, we're going to want to use r again first here. So we're going to do 11 minus negative 3 over r minus 2, which guess what? That's the same thing. Even though the r is in the denominator here, we're still okay. This gives us a positive 14 over r minus 2 equals 7 over 1. And again, I'll cross multiply to solve this. If you wanted to do something like multiply these both by 2 and then set them equal, that also works. But that's just something we could try out. Oh, later. All right, so this gives us 7 times r minus 2 equals 1 times 14, which is just 14. I again like to divide by 7 here and get r minus 2 equals 2, which then tells us r is 4. Again, if we check that out, 14 over 4 minus 2 would be 14 over 2, and 14 over 2 is 7. So we're good. All right, third and final one, the tricky one, because r here is an improper fraction, right? Let's try it out. So let's do r minus 3 over 5 minus negative 3. And again, be careful of those negatives there. That can trip some people up. This gives us r minus 3 over 8 equals negative 5 over 24. Here, we're going to cross multiply again. But we realize that we can't just divide by negative, we can't divide by 24 here. We definitely could, right? If you like to divide by 24 here, I think that's totally fine. You just need to make sure you simplify your fraction. I'm going to do another bold step and I'm going to distribute. So I'm going to do a 24r minus 72 equals negative 40. And again, if you want to divide by 24 here, more power to you. Go for it. But I add 72 to both sides, and this gets me 24r equals 32. Or, yeah. And now we need to divide by 24 on both sides. And this gets r is equal to 32 over 24. We realize these are both divisible by 8. So we can simplify this down to 4/3. Checking this one's a little bit trickier, right? Because you kind of have to deal with fractions in there. But if we did 4/3 minus 3 over 8, well, this 3 becomes a negative 9 over 3, which would give us a negative 5 over 3 over 8, which simplifies down to negative 5 over 24. And so we're right. R is 4/3. Hey, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, let me know. Send me an email or throw it in the comments. Otherwise, have a great day. Make sure you're doing the extra practice. Bye bye.